In the final episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender, a 12-year-old boy places his hands on the forehead and chest of the most powerful firebender in the world and makes a choice that no one told him he was allowed to make. Every past Avatar told him to kill Fire Lord Ozai. Every mentor, every spiritual guide, every accumulated lifetime of wisdom across 10,000 years of the Avatar cycle said the same thing: end him. Aang refused. He found another way. He bent the energy within Ozai and took his bending without taking his life. And in that moment, standing over a defeated tyrant in the ruins of a burning world, the show delivered its first life-changing lesson. The lesson is not that violence is wrong. The lesson is that the answer everyone agrees on is not always the right answer, and the courage to find your own answer, even when it means standing alone against 10,000 years of precedent, is the most important kind of courage there is. That lesson is embedded in the lore of the Avatar universe the way fossils are embedded in stone. You have to dig for it. You have to look past the surface of the adventure and the comedy and the elemental martial arts and see what is underneath. And what is underneath is a mythology so rich with meaning, so dense with applicable wisdom, that you could spend years unpacking it and still find new layers. Avatar is not just a story about a boy who saves the world. If this is the sort of thing that pulls you in, it is free, and it genuinely makes a difference. It is a manual for living disguised as a children's show, written with such intelligence and such care that the lessons it teaches become more relevant as you get older, not less. Tonight we are going to go through those lessons. Not the obvious ones, not the ones you can find in a listicle or a motivational poster, the deep ones. The ones that are woven into the lore itself, into the mythology, into the way the world works, into the rules that govern bending and spirits and nations and the people who live within them. These are lessons that Avatar does not teach you directly. It teaches them the way the best teachers teach anything, by showing you a world that operates according to certain principles and letting you discover the principles yourself. And the principles are consistent. They are not contradictory or arbitrary or dependent on which character you identify with. They form a coherent philosophy, a complete worldview, a way of understanding yourself and your place in the world that is grounded not in abstraction but in story. Not in commandments, but in characters. Not in rules you are told to follow, but in people you are invited to watch and love and argue with and learn from. The philosophy is embedded in the lore the way minerals are embedded in water. You drink the story and the philosophy enters you without you noticing. And by the time you notice, it has already changed you, the way a river changes the stone it flows over. Not by force, but by persistence. Not by a single impact, but by the accumulation of 10,000 gentle touches. The lore of Avatar is not background decoration. It is not world building for world building's sake. The kind of fantasy lore that exists to make the world feel complete, but that has no bearing on the themes or the characters or the questions the story is asking. Avatar's lore is thematic. Every piece of mythology, every spirit, every bending technique, every historical event in the Avatar timeline exists to illuminate something about the human condition. The story of Wan and Rava is not just an origin story. It is a parable about the consequences of well-intentioned interference. The story of Tui and La is not just mythology. It is a meditation on interdependence, on the way opposing forces sustain each other, on the fact that the moon and the ocean need each other the way inhale needs exhale. The story of the lion turtles is not just history. It is a reimagining of the relationship between power and its source, between what we can do and where the ability to do it comes from. Every culture in the Avatar universe is a lesson in disguise. The water tribes teach adaptability and the dangers of isolation. The Earth Kingdom teaches endurance and the dangers of rigidity. The Fire Nation teaches ambition and the dangers of unchecked expansion. The Air Nomads teach detachment and the dangers of disengagement. Each culture is a partial truth, a correct answer to a question that has more than one correct answer. And the Avatar, who belongs to all four cultures and to none of them, is the reminder that no partial truth is sufficient, that the complete truth requires all four perspectives held simultaneously, in tension, in balance, in the dynamic equilibrium that is the show's central metaphor for a well-lived life. The bending arts themselves are lessons. Waterbending teaches you to redirect force rather than oppose it, to use your opponent's energy against them, to flow rather than fight, to adapt rather than resist. This is not just a combat technique, it is a philosophy of engagement. It is a way of dealing with conflict that privileges intelligence over strength, flexibility over rigidity, the ability to absorb and redirect over the ability to block and withstand. Earthbending teaches you to be grounded, to be stable, to wait for the right moment rather than acting impulsively, to trust in the solidity of your position and the patience of your approach. Firebending teaches you to be decisive, to commit fully to your actions, to generate your own energy rather than waiting for the world to provide it. Airbending teaches you to be light, to let things pass through you without resistance, to value freedom over security, to release attachment rather than cling to it. Each bending art is a complete philosophy of life. Each one, practiced with discipline and understanding, would produce a person of remarkable quality, but each one, practiced in isolation, would produce a person with a blind spot the size of an ocean. The waterbender who only flows never stands firm. The earthbender who only endures never adapts. The firebender who only acts never reflects. The airbender who only releases never commits. The complete person, like the complete avatar, practices all four, not by bending all four elements, which most people cannot do, but by cultivating all four approaches, which anyone can do because the elements are not just substances. They are attitudes, they are orientations, they are ways of relating to a world that requires all of them in different measures at different times, and the wisdom to know which one to use is itself the most important bending of all. The first lesson is about identity, and it is taught through the most unlikely teacher in the franchise. Zuko's story is the most complete character arc in animation history, and the lesson it teaches is so simple that it is easy to miss its profundity. The lesson is that who you are is not determined by where you come from. It is determined by where you choose to go. Zuko is born into the Fire Nation royal family. His father is the Fire Lord. His sister is a prodigy. His grandfather is a conqueror, and his great-grandfather started a war that has lasted 100 years. Everything about Zuko's identity, his name, his nation, his family, his culture, his education, every structure that has shaped him since birth, points in one direction: power, conquest, the continuation of a war that has consumed the world. He is born on a path, and the path leads to a throne, and the throne is soaked in the blood of 100 years of genocide and imperialism and the systematic destruction of entire cultures. And Zuko steps off the path, not easily, not quickly, not with the dramatic clarity of a movie montage where the hero realizes the truth and changes sides in a single scene. Zuko steps off the path slowly, painfully, with setbacks and regressions and moments of weakness where he steps back onto it because the path is familiar and the unknown is terrifying. His transformation takes 3 seasons, it takes dozens of episodes, it takes the patient, persistent influence of an uncle who never stops loving him, never stops believing in him, never stops pouring tea and playing pie show and waiting, with the infinite patience of a man who has learned that growth cannot be forced, only witnessed. Iroh's role in Zuko's transformation is itself a lesson, and it is one of the most important lessons the show offers. Iroh does not fix Zuko, he does not heal him or save him or rescue him from his worst impulses. He is present, he is consistent, he is kind without being permissive, honest without being cruel, firm without being rigid. He tells Zuko the truth even when Zuko does not want to hear it. He forgives Zuko even when Zuko has not earned forgiveness. He embodies the principle that love is not a transaction. It is not something you give in exchange for good behavior. It is something you give because the person you love needs it, especially when they do not deserve it, especially when they are making choices that break your heart, especially when every rational calculation says that the investment is wasted and the person is lost. Iroh's love for Zuko is the show's most powerful argument against giving up on people. The world gave up on Zuko. His father gave up on him and burned him. His sister gave up on him and mocked him. His nation gave up on him and exiled him. The Avatar and his friends regarded him as an enemy. Every external signal Zuko received said the same thing: you are not worth the effort. You are beyond redemption. You are your father's son and your nation's soldier, and your family's disappointment, and that is all you will ever be. Iroh said no. Iroh looked at this angry, scarred, confused boy and saw something that no one else could see, and he held on to that vision with the quiet stubbornness of a man who has lost one son and refuses to lose another. He held on through Zuko's rage, through Zuko's betrayal, through the moment in the crystal catacombs beneath Ba Sing Se, when Zuko chose Azula over Iroh, and Iroh went to prison and Zuko went back to the palace, and everything Iroh had worked for seemed to be destroyed. Iroh held on. And when Zuko finally came back, when he finally stepped off the path for good, when he finally showed up at the White Lotus camp and asked for forgiveness, Iroh did not make him beg. He did not make him suffer. He did not extract a pound of flesh as the price of readmission. He embraced him. He held him. He wept. And the weeping was not grief. It was relief. The relief of a man who bet everything on a boy, and the boy finally came home. The show explores grief through other characters with equal sensitivity, and each exploration adds a different dimension to the lesson. Aang's grief for the air nomads is the grief of extinction. It is the grief of being the last, the grief that has no community to share it with because the community is the thing that was lost. When Aang discovers the skeleton of Monk Gyatso at the Southern Air Temple, he enters the Avatar state, not through training or meditation, but through the pure force of grief so overwhelming that it triggers the most powerful defense mechanism in his spiritual arsenal. His grief is a bomb. It detonates, and the detonation is the show's way of saying that some griefs are too large for the body that carries them, that some losses are so total that the human response is not tears, but transformation, not crying but becoming something else entirely, something larger, something that can hold the grief because the person cannot. Aang learns over 3 seasons to carry the grief without being destroyed by it. He does not overcome it. He does not move past it. He carries it the way Iroh carries the loss of Lu Ten, as a permanent feature of his internal landscape, a weight that never disappears but that he learns to bear, that he learns to incorporate into his identity so that the grief becomes not just a wound, but a source of purpose. His air nomad identity is sharpened by the grief. His commitment to peace is deepened by the knowledge of what war destroys. His gentleness is informed by the understanding that gentleness was the air nomad's defining quality, and that the preservation of gentleness in a world that killed everyone who embodied it is an act of defiance as much as an act of character. Sokka's grief for Yu is quieter but no less real. Yu became the moon. She did not die in the conventional sense. She was transformed, and the transformation means that Sokka's loss is unique, unlike any other loss in the franchise, because the person he lost is not gone. She is above him. Every night, visible, luminous, unreachable. He cannot visit her grave because she does not have one. He cannot say goodbye because she is always there. He cannot move on because the moon rises every night, and every night he is reminded that the girl he loved is looking down at him from a distance that cannot be crossed by any boat or balloon or bending art. The show treats Sokka's relationship with Suki, which develops after Yu's transformation, with a sensitivity that respects both the new love and the old grief. Sokka does not replace Yu with Suki. He does not move on if moving on means forgetting or replacing or filing the old love away in a drawer marked past. He adds Suki to his heart without removing Yue from it. The heart, the show seems to say, is not a fixed container with a maximum capacity. It is a living, growing thing that expands to accommodate new love without requiring the eviction of old love. You can love someone who is gone and someone who is here. You can carry grief and carry joy simultaneously. You can look up at the moon and feel the ache of Yue's absence, and then look down at Suki and feel the warmth of her presence. And both feelings are true, and both are valid, and neither negates the other. This is maybe the most practical piece of wisdom the show offers about grief. You do not have to choose between mourning and living. You do not have to finish grieving before you start loving again. You do not have to reach the end of the sorrow before you can access joy. The sorrow and the joy coexist. They always coexist. They are the yin and yang of emotional life. The push and pull of loving in a world where loss is inevitable, and the people who navigate grief most successfully are not the people who resolve it, but the people who learn to hold it alongside everything else. The people who make room for it without letting it fill all the room. The people who carry it the way you carry a tender joint. Aware of it, careful with it, protective of it, but not immobilized by it. Still walking, still moving, still living despite the ache. Zuko's grief is perhaps the most complex because it is grief for a relationship that never existed. Zuko grieves for the father he never had. He grieves for the love that Ozai never gave him. He grieves for the version of his family that exists only in his imagination. The version where Ozai is proud of him and Azula is his ally and his mother never left, and the dinner table is a place of warmth rather than a battleground. This imaginary family is the thing Zuko pursues for most of the series. The thing he believes he can earn through capturing the Avatar. The thing he believes will be restored if he can just prove himself worthy, if he can just be good enough, brave enough, successful enough to earn the love that should have been given freely. The lesson of Zuko's grief is that you cannot earn what should be given. Love is not a reward for achievement. Approval is not a prize for accomplishment. The father who withholds love until the child has proven worthy is not a father who loves conditionally. He is a father who does not love at all, because love, real love, the love that Iroh demonstrates every episode, does not require proof. It does not demand evidence. It does not set conditions or benchmarks or tests that must be passed before it is dispensed. It simply is. It is present, it is there when you deserve it, and there when you do not. And there especially when you do not. Because the moments when you do not deserve love are the moments when you need it most. And the person who gives it to you in those moments, the Iroh in your life, the person who holds you when you have done the worst thing you have ever done and says, "I was never angry with you. I was sad because I was afraid you had lost your way." That person is the person who teaches you what love actually is. Zuko's grief resolves not when he earns Ozai's love, but when he stops trying to. When he realizes that the love he was pursuing was never available, that the father he was trying to impress was not capable of being impressed, that the approval he was seeking was not being withheld as motivation, but was simply absent, had always been absent, would always be absent regardless of what Zuko achieved or proved or became. The grief resolves when Zuko transfers his need for a father from the man who burned him to the man who poured tea for him, from the man who punished him for speaking out against a general's plan, to sacrifice soldiers to the man who played pay show with him on a boat and never asked for anything except his company. The grief resolves when Zuko realizes that the father he has been searching for has been standing behind him the entire time, holding a teacup, waiting for him to turn around. This is the lesson. Not just that people can change, although that is true and important. The deeper lesson is about what it takes to help someone change. It takes patience, it takes consistency, it takes the willingness to be hurt, to be rejected, to be betrayed, and to keep showing up anyway because the person you believe in has not yet become the person you believe they can be, and your belief, your stubborn, irrational, evidence-defying belief, is one of the forces that will eventually make the becoming possible. You cannot force someone to grow, but you can create the conditions in which growth is possible. You can be the person who is there when they are ready. You can be the cup of tea waiting on the table when they finally come through the door. Zuko's identity crisis is the most visible version of a theme that runs through every character in the show. Everyone in Avatar is asking the same question: who am I when the roles I was given no longer fit? Katara is a waterbender in a tribe that has lost all its waterbenders. Sokka is a warrior in a village with no warriors. Toph is a blind girl in a family that treats blindness as a disability rather than a difference. Aang is an air nomad in a world with no air nomads. Each of them was born into a role that the world defined for them, and each of them must decide whether to accept that role or rewrite it. The show's answer is consistent across all of these stories. The role you were given is the starting point, not the destination. The identity you were born into is the raw material, not the finished product. What you make of it, what you keep, and what you discard and what you add, that is who you are. Katara was born a waterbender in a dying tribe. She becomes the greatest waterbender of her generation and the teacher who ensures that the Southern style survives. Sokka was born a boy trying to be a warrior because all the real warriors had left. He becomes a strategist, an inventor, a leader whose strength is not physical but intellectual, whose contribution to the war effort is not fighting but thinking. Not the sword, but the plan. Toph was born blind into a family that saw blindness as limitation. She becomes the inventor of an entirely new bending discipline. The person whose blindness is not a disability, but the source of her greatest power. The sensitivity that allows her to feel what others cannot feel and bend what others cannot bend. Each of these transformations follows the same pattern. The world tells you who you are. You listen, you consider, and then you decide for yourself. Not in defiance of the world, not in rebellion against it, but in conversation with it. You take what the world gives you, the gifts and the limitations, the advantages and the disadvantages, the things that help and the things that hurt, and you make something out of them. Something that is yours, something that is new, something that the world did not expect and could not have predicted because the world's categories are too narrow and its expectations are too fixed, and its understanding of what people can become is always smaller than what people actually become when they are given the space and the support and the time to grow. This is why representation matters in the Avatar universe, and why the show's commitment to depicting characters from diverse backgrounds and with diverse abilities is not just an aesthetic choice, but a philosophical one. The show is arguing through its characters that identity is creative, that limitation is raw material, that the things the world considers weaknesses, Toph's blindness, Sokka's lack of bending, Aang's pacifism, Zuko's shame, are not obstacles to be overcome but elements to be integrated, not problems to be solved but materials to be used, not deficiencies to be corrected but differences to be respected and developed and transformed into sources of unique strength. The Avatar universe does not have a single definition of strength, it has dozens. Strength is Toph bending metal for the first time. Strength is Sokka standing up after the Day of Black Sun. Strength is Katara choosing not to kill. Strength is Aang refusing to abandon his principles. Strength is Iroh sitting in a prison cell doing sit-ups, preparing for the moment when his body will need to do what his mind has been planning for months. The jailbreak that will coincide with the eclipse. The escape that requires not spiritual growth, but raw physical power. The kind of strength that a 60-year-old man should not have, but that Iroh has because he has been training in secret. Doing push-ups in the dark, building the body that will break the bars. Because some situations require violence, and Iroh is wise enough to know when those situations arise and strong enough to meet them when they do. Iroh in prison is its own lesson. The lesson is that wisdom does not mean passivity, that patience does not mean inaction, that the quiet, tea-drinking, pie show-playing uncle is also the dragon of the West, the man who breathed fire, the general who commanded armies, the warrior who could level a city wall if the situation demanded it. Iroh contains multitudes. He is gentle and he is fierce. He is patient and he is decisive. He is the man who sings leaves from the vine at sunset and the man who blasts through a prison wall at dawn. He is both, simultaneously, without contradiction, because wisdom is not the rejection of strength. It is the knowledge of when to be strong and when to be gentle, when to fight and when to pour tea, when to speak and when to listen, when to act and when to wait. The show reinforces this duality through characters who fail to achieve it. Jet is fierce without being gentle, and his fierceness consumes him. Long Feng is controlled without being compassionate, and his control becomes tyranny. Zhao is ambitious without being reflective, and his ambition walks him into the hands of a spirit that has been waiting 10,000 years to collect the debt he did not know he was incurring. Each failed character in Avatar is a person who committed to one half of a duality and refused the other half, who chose strength without vulnerability, or passion without patience, or certainty without doubt, and who was destroyed by the incompleteness of their commitment. The show also teaches this through the concept of Agni Kai, the fire duel that serves as the Fire Nation's primary method of resolving disputes. The Agni Kai is a ritual of pure fire, of pure aggression, of the complete commitment of self to the destruction of an opponent. And the Agni Kais in the series, Zuko vs. Zhao, Zuko vs. Azula, are both resolved not by superior firepower, but by superior character. Zuko defeats Zhao not because he is a stronger firebender, but because he has learned restraint. Because Iroh has taught him that firebending is not just about power, but about control. Not just about what you can burn, but about what you choose not to burn. And the final Agni Kai between Zuko and Azula is won not by Zuko alone, but by the partnership between Zuko and Katara, fire and water working together. The two elements that are supposed to be opposites, combining to defeat a threat that neither could have defeated alone. That final Agni Kai is the show's most beautiful visual metaphor for the lesson about duality. Fire and water, red and blue. Zuko and Katara, the prince who was consumed by anger and the girl who was consumed by grief, both of them scarred, both of them transformed, both of them standing together against the most dangerous firebender alive, and winning not through power but through partnership, not through dominance but through collaboration, not through the triumph of one element over another but through the synthesis of both. The image of Katara healing Zuko after the battle, water glowing against his chest where the lightning struck, is the final statement of this lesson. Fire hurt him. Water heals him. The element that his nation weaponized is the element that saves his life. The person from the nation his nation tried to destroy is the person who kneels beside him and puts her hands on his wound and pours healing water into the place where his sister's lightning tried to end him. The healing is not just physical, it is symbolic. It is the reconciliation of fire and water. It is the demonstration that the elements are not enemies, they are partners. They need each other. Fire without water is destruction. Water without fire is stagnation. Together, in balance, in the careful, dynamic, never-perfect equilibrium that the Avatar represents, they are life. This is how the show ends. Not with a battle, not with a victory speech, not with the triumphant declaration that good has defeated evil and the world is saved forever. The show ends with a kiss. With Aang and Katara on the balcony of Iroh's tea shop in Ba Sing Se, the city that fell and was reclaimed. The city where Iroh lost his son and built a new life. The city where Zuko betrayed everything Iroh had taught him, and then came back. The city that is, in the Avatar universe's geography, the place where things are lost and found, where stories end and begin, where the tea is hot and the evening is warm, and the war is over, and the people you love are inside, and the person you love most is beside you, and the moment is, for now, in this breath, in this light, in this imperfect and temporary and impossibly beautiful now. Enough. The show ends with enough. Not with everything, not with the resolution of every conflict and the healing of every wound and the answering of every question. With enough. With the recognition that life does not end with a finale. That balance is not achieved and maintained. That the work continues. That tomorrow there will be new problems and new conflicts and new imbalances that require new solutions. But tonight, right now, on this balcony, with this tea, with these people, it is enough. And enough, the show has been telling you for 61 episodes, is not a consolation prize. It is the point. It is the whole point. The tea is hot. The people are here. The war is over. The sky is orange and pink and fading into blue. And it is enough. This duality is the show's most mature insight about character. People are not one thing. The good are not purely good. The strong are not always strong. The wise are not always wise. People are combinations, mixtures, alloys of qualities that do not always fit together neatly, and the attempt to be one thing, to be purely strong or purely gentle or purely wise, is the attempt to amputate parts of yourself that are essential, that are necessary, that are part of the full picture of who you are. Azula tries to be purely strong, and she breaks. Jet tries to be purely righteous, and he loses himself. Long Feng tries to be purely controlled, and he is overcome. The characters who succeed in Avatar are the characters who accept their complexity, who embrace their contradictions, who learn to be both gentle and fierce, both vulnerable and strong, not alternating between these qualities, but holding them simultaneously, the way a firebender holds both the capacity to destroy and the capacity to warm, the way a waterbender holds both the capacity to heal and the capacity to control, the way a person holds both the capacity for greatness and the capacity for failure, and does not pretend that either one negates the other. The second lesson is about grief, and it is taught through the show's most devastating 6 minutes. The Tales of Ba Sing Se is a collection of short vignettes, each one following a different member of the group through a day in the Earth Kingdom capital. Iroh's tale is the last and the shortest. He spends the day helping strangers. He sings to a crying child. He helps a mugger reconsider his life choices. He corrects a musician's instrument. Small kindnesses. Ordinary moment. Nothing dramatic or heroic or narratively significant. And then, as the sun sets, Iroh walks to a hilltop beneath a tree and sets up a small memorial. He lights incense, he places a portrait, and he sings, "Leaves from the vine, falling so slow, like fragile tiny shells, drifting in the foam." And the portrait is of Lu Ten, his son, who died in the siege of Ba Sing Se, the siege that Iroh himself led, the siege that Iroh abandoned when his son was killed. The military campaign that ended not in victory, but in the loss of the only person Iroh loved more than anything else in the world. The screen reads, "In honor of Mako." Mako was Iroh's original voice actor, who died during the production of the show. The dedication transforms the scene from a character moment into something that transcends fiction entirely. A moment where the grief of the character and the grief of the people who created the character become indistinguishable, where the tears are both Iroh's and the animators and the audience's, where the boundary between the story and the world dissolves and what remains just grief, pure and simple and universal, the grief of losing someone you cannot replace. The lesson of Iroh's tale is not about how to overcome grief, it is about how to carry it. Iroh does not overcome the death of his son. He does not move on. He does not find closure, because closure is a fiction invented by people who have never lost someone irreplaceable. What Iroh does is carry the grief. He carries it the way you carry a wound that has healed into a scar, the way you carry a weight that has become so familiar that you no longer notice it most of the time, but that is always there, always present, always part of who you are. A heaviness in the chest that surfaces when the light hits a certain way, or a song plays that you have not heard in years, or a child laughs in a way that reminds you of another laugh, a specific laugh, the laugh you would give anything to hear one more time. Iroh carries his grief into every act of kindness. The singing to the child, the gentleness with the mugger, the tea, the patience, the warmth, all of it is connected to Lu Ten. All of it is Iroh's way of honoring his son by being the kind of person his son would have been proud of, the kind of person who makes the world gentler, who reduces the amount of pain in it by whatever small amount a single person can manage, who lights incense on a hilltop at sunset and sings a song that no one else can hear, and keeps living, keeps being kind, keeps pouring tea, because the alternative to carrying the grief is being consumed by it. And Iroh has seen what consumption looks like. He has seen it in Ozai and in Azula, and in the Fire Nation's century-long tantrum of destruction. And he has chosen a different response, a quieter response, a response that does not demand that the world match your pain, but instead asks what you can give to the world despite your pain. The third lesson is about failure, and it is taught through the show's most controversial sequence. The Day of Black Sun is the invasion plan that Sokka has been developing for half a season. The plan that was going to end the war. The plan that used the information from Wan Shi Tong's library, the eclipse that would temporarily disable firebending and give the Allied forces a window to strike at the heart of the Fire Nation. The plan is brilliant. The execution is flawless. The Allied forces fight their way to the Fire Nation capital with precision and courage, and everything Sokka planned works exactly as he planned it. And they lose. They lose because Azula knew they were coming. They lose because the Fire Lord was not in the palace. They lose because the Fire Nation had intelligence about the invasion and prepared for it, and the entire plan, months of preparation and sacrifice and risk, was countered before it began. The eclipse ends, the Firebenders regain their power, the Allied forces are trapped, and the adults, the parents and the warriors and the leaders, surrender so that the children can escape on Appa, and the children fly away into the smoke and the sunset, and the knowledge that everything they worked for has failed. Sokka's response to this failure is one of the most honest depictions of defeat in any animated series. He does not brush it off, he does not immediately start planning the next attack. He is devastated. He is crushed by the weight of having planned something so carefully and having it fail so completely, and having people pay the price for his failure. People who trusted him, people who followed his plan, people who are now in Fire Nation prisons because of a strategy that he devised and that he believed would work and that did not. The lesson the show teaches through this failure is that failure is not the end. It is not the final verdict. It is not the thing that defines you unless you let it. Sokka fails on the day of Black Sun, and he gets up. He does not get up immediately. He does not get up easily, but he gets up. He learns from the failure, he incorporates what went wrong into his understanding of what could go right. He does not abandon planning because his plan failed. He becomes a better planner. He does not abandon strategy because his strategy was countered. He develops better strategies. The failure becomes fuel. The defeat becomes education. The worst day of his life becomes the foundation of the skills that will eventually contribute to victory. The show reinforces this lesson through its treatment of Aang's own failures, which are numerous and which the show refuses to minimize. Aang fails at the North Pole, where his inability to control the Avatar state leads to a fusion with the ocean spirit that destroys the Fire Nation fleet but that Aang has no memory of and no control over. He is used as a weapon rather than wielding a weapon, and the distinction matters because a weapon that operates without the wielder's control is not a tool. It is a danger. Aang knows this. He is afraid of the Avatar state throughout the series, precisely because it represents a power that he cannot fully control, a force that overwhelms his personality and replaces it with something ancient and vast and indifferent to the concerns of a 12-year-old boy. Aang fails in Ba Sing Se. The fall of Ba Sing Se is one of the most consequential failures in the series, and it is a failure of politics rather than combat. Aang and the group spend an entire arc trying to reach the Earth King, trying to inform him about the war, trying to penetrate the layers of secrecy and manipulation that Long Feng has wrapped around the capital like a cocoon. They succeed in reaching the king, they succeed in revealing the truth, and then they fail anyway, because Long Feng and Azula outmaneuver them politically, because the Dai Li switch sides, because the structures of power in Ba Sing Se are more complex and more corrupt than the group anticipated, and because no amount of individual heroism can overcome institutional rot when the institution is designed specifically to resist change. Aang's most personal failure is the Season 2 finale itself, where he makes the right spiritual choice, the choice to open the 7th chakra, the choice to let go of his attachment to Katara, and is struck down for it. He is literally killed by Azula's lightning at the moment of his greatest spiritual achievement. He dies doing the right thing. He dies making the correct choice. He dies at the exact moment when everything should have worked out. And the fact that it does not, the fact that the universe rewards his spiritual progress with a lightning bolt to the back, is the show's most honest statement about the relationship between doing the right thing and getting the right result. They are not the same. Doing the right thing does not guarantee the right outcome. The world is not a vending machine where you insert correct behavior and receive success. The world is messy and cruel and frequently unjust, and the right choice can lead to the worst outcome. And the lesson is not to stop making right choices. The lesson is to make them anyway. To make them knowing that they might not work. To make them knowing that you might be struck down. To make them because they are right, not because they are safe. Katara brings Aang back with the spirit water. He survives, but the near death and the recovery that follows change him. The Aang of Season 3 is different from the Aang of Seasons 1 and 2. He is more serious, more burdened, more aware of what is at stake and what it costs. He is still Aang. He still rides Appa and plays with Momo and makes jokes that no one laughs at. But underneath the playfulness, there is a weight that was not there before. The weight of having died and come back. The weight of knowing that the universe does not protect you just because you are the hero. The weight of understanding, at 12 years old, that good intentions are not armor and right choices are not shields. And the world will hurt you regardless of your virtue. This weight is what makes the finale's resolution so powerful. Aang carries this weight into his battle with Ozai. He carries the death and the resurrection and the failure and the grief and the 100 years of genocide and the weight of being the last of his kind and the pressure of being the world's only hope. And he carries all of it. And he still chooses not to kill. He still chooses the path that no one else can see. He still finds the third option, the option that does not exist until he creates it. The option that requires not just power but imagination, not just strength but creativity, not just the ability to defeat an enemy, but the ability to conceive of a defeat that does not require destruction. This is the lesson about failure that Avatar teaches, and it is life-changing because it is true. Failure does not disqualify you. Failure educates you. The worst things that happen to you become the materials from which you build the best things you create. Aang's death in Ba Sing Se is the furnace in which the Aang of the finale is forged. Sokka's defeat on the Day of Black Sun is the classroom in which the Sokka of the invasion of the Fire Nation Palace is trained. Zuko's 3 seasons of failure are the journey that produces the Zuko who can stand in front of Azula's lightning and take the hit. Every failure is preparation. Every defeat is education. Every wound is a teacher. And the lesson, the one that the wounds teach if you are willing to learn it, is that the person who emerges from failure is stronger than the person who entered it. Not because failure makes you stronger, which is a platitude, but because failure reveals what you are made of, which is a truth. And what you are made of if you have done the work, if you have had the love, if you have had the hero in your corner pouring tea and waiting, what you are made of is enough. This is a lesson that most stories do not teach, because most stories do not show failure honestly. Most stories show failure as a brief setback, a dark moment before the inevitable triumph, a valley on the way to the peak. Avatar shows failure, as defeat, as the real, crushing, consequential experience of having given everything you had and having it not be enough. And then, it shows you what happens next. Not a miracle, not a deus ex machina, just a person who was knocked down and who chose to stand up, and who stood up not because standing up was easy, but because lying down was not an option. Because the war was still happening, and the people in the prisons were still imprisoned, and the world still needed saving, and the only person who could do the planning was the person who had failed at it. And so he picked up the pieces and he started again. The 4th lesson is about compassion, and it is taught through the show's most difficult moral scenario. In the Southern Raiders episode, Katara confronts the man who killed her mother. She tracks him down. She finds him. She stands over him with the power to end his life, the rage to justify it, the grief to fuel it, and every reason in the world to take revenge. Zuko, who accompanies her, expects her to kill the man. The audience expects her to kill the man. Every narrative convention says that this is the moment of violent catharsis, the moment when the wronged heroine takes justice into her own hands, and the audience cheers. Katara does not kill him. She looks at the man who killed her mother, and she sees what he has become, a pathetic, broken, frightened person living with his own mother in a house that smells like decay. She sees that revenge would not bring her mother back. She sees that killing this man would not heal the wound. She sees that the rage she has been carrying, the rage that has powered her across the ocean and through the storm and into this man's living room, is not justice, it is pain. And pain, directed outward, does not become justice. It becomes more pain. Katara's mercy is not weakness. The show is very careful about this. Katara's decision not to kill is presented not as an inability to act, but as a choice, the hardest choice she has ever made. Harder than bloodbending. Harder than any fight she has ever been in. Because the choice to not do something when every fiber of your being is screaming at you to do it requires a strength that physical power cannot provide. It requires the strength to hold your own pain and not pass it on. To absorb the blow and not redirect it. To be the place where the cycle of violence stops, not because you are weak, but because you are strong enough to bear the cost of stopping it. She does not forgive him. The show is careful about this too. Katara tells Zuko afterward that she will never forgive the man who killed her mother. Forgiveness is not the lesson. The lesson is that compassion and forgiveness are not the same thing. You can refuse to forgive someone and still choose not to destroy them. You can hold your anger and still choose not to act on it. You can carry the wound and still choose not to inflict a matching wound on someone else. Compassion is not the absence of anger. It is the presence of something stronger than anger. The presence of a commitment to not become the thing that hurt you, to not let the violence done to you become the violence you do, to not let the cycle continue through your hands even when your hands are strong enough and your cause is just enough and your pain is real enough to justify anything. The Southern Raiders episode also teaches a subtler lesson about the difference between justice and revenge. A distinction that the Avatar universe articulates more clearly than almost any other narrative. Revenge is personal. It is about your pain, your loss, your need for the world to acknowledge what was done to you by doing something equivalent to someone else. Justice is structural. It is about the system, the pattern, the conditions that allowed the harm to happen in the first place. Revenge targets the individual, justice targets the structure. And the Avatar universe, through Katara's choice and through the show's broader narrative, consistently argues that targeting the individual is satisfying but insufficient, while targeting the structure is difficult but necessary. Katara does not kill the man who killed her mother, but the show does not present this as the end of the story. The man is not brought to justice, he is not arrested, he is not punished by any external authority. He simply exists, pathetic and broken, living with his elderly mother in a house that time is slowly consuming. The show does not wrap this up with a bow. It does not provide closure. It does not offer the satisfaction of seeing the guilty punished by the systems that should have prevented the crime in the first place, because those systems do not exist. During the 100-Year War, there is no international court, no tribunal, no mechanism for holding Fire Nation soldiers accountable for crimes committed against civilians of other nations. The system itself is broken, the structure itself is the problem, and Katara's restraint, her decision not to kill, is a moral achievement, but it is not a solution. The solution requires something larger than one person's mercy. It requires the reconstruction of the systems that allowed the crime to happen, the dismantling of the war machine, the creation of institutions that prevent future atrocities rather than merely punishing past ones. This distinction between personal morality and structural change is one of the Avatar universe's most sophisticated insights, and it runs through both series. Aang defeats Ozai. That is personal. But the real work, the hard work, the unglamorous work, happens after the finale, when Zuko becomes Fire Lord and has to rebuild a nation that has been organized around imperialism for 100 years, when Republic City has to be founded as a place where all four nations can coexist, when the institutions of peace have to be created from scratch because the institutions of war destroyed everything that came before. The personal victory is the dramatic climax. The structural change is the real story. And the real story is boring and complicated and does not end with a battle but with a negotiation. Not with a lightning bolt but with a committee meeting. Not with the defeat of a villain, but with the slow, patient, frustrating work of building a world where villains are less likely to emerge because the conditions that produce them have been addressed. Aang understands this, which is why he spends his post-war years building Republic City rather than fighting new enemies. The comics and the Legend of Korra show us an Aang who is less a warrior and more a diplomat. A man who uses his status and his power not to defeat people, but to bring them together, to create the structures and the institutions and the norms that will maintain balance after he is gone. This is the unglamorous version of the Avatar's job, the version that does not make for exciting animation, but that is far more important than any battle. Anyone can defeat a tyrant. Very few people can build the world that makes tyranny less likely. The show's treatment of Jet provides another angle on the compassion lesson, and it is one of the most nuanced treatments of radicalization in children's media. Jet is a freedom fighter who has been orphaned by the Fire Nation and who has devoted his life to fighting Fire Nation soldiers. His cause is just. His grievance is real. His anger is legitimate. The Fire Nation killed his parents. The Fire Nation burned his village. The Fire Nation has spent 100 years systematically destroying everything Jet loves. His hatred of the Fire Nation is not irrational. It is the most rational response imaginable to the things that have been done to him. And Jet is wrong. Not wrong in his grievance, wrong in his response. Jet's hatred of the Fire Nation does not distinguish between soldiers and civilians, between combatants and innocent people, between the nation that committed the atrocity and the individuals who happen to share that nation's nationality. He is willing to flood an entire village, drowning Fire Nation civilians, including children, because they are Fire Nation, and the Fire Nation killed his parents, and the logic of revenge does not allow for nuance. The logic of revenge says that the pain you carry entitles you to inflict pain on anyone who belongs to the group that hurt you. And the logic is wrong, and Jet cannot see that it is wrong because his pain is so large and so real that it fills his entire field of vision, and when pain is all you can see, everything looks like a valid target. Katara's initial attraction to Jet and her subsequent rejection of him is the show's way of illustrating how seductive righteous anger can be and how dangerous it becomes when it is not tempered by compassion. Jet is charismatic. He is brave. He is fighting for a cause that the audience sympathizes with, and he is willing to kill children to advance that cause, and the willingness disqualifies him not because his cause is wrong, but because his methods are. And the show draws this line clearly and firmly and without equivocation. Your pain does not justify the infliction of equivalent pain on the innocent. Your loss does not entitle you to create equivalent loss in others. The cycle of violence does not end because one side's violence is more justified than the other side's. It ends when someone decides to stop, when someone absorbs the blow and does not return it, when someone chooses to be the last victim rather than the next perpetrator. This lesson about the cycle of violence connects to a broader lesson about generational trauma that runs through the entire franchise. The 100-Year War is not just a political event, it is a generational wound. It is a trauma that has been passed down through 4 generations of every nation, shaping the people who live within it in ways that they often cannot see and certainly did not choose. The children of the Fire Nation are raised to believe in their nation's supremacy. The children of the Earth Kingdom are raised to endure. The children of the Water Tribes are raised with the memory of raids and loss. And the children, in every case, are inheriting a world they did not create, carrying a weight they did not earn, living inside a story that started before they were born and that will continue after they die. Zuko is the Fire Nation's generational trauma personified. He inherits Sozin's war, Aslan's cruelty, Ozai's abuse. He inherits 100 years of ideology that says the Fire Nation is superior, that the war is justified, that the suffering of other nations is the necessary cost of Fire Nation greatness. He inherits this the way children inherit everything, passively, without consent, absorbing it through the culture and the education and the dinner table conversations, and the scar on his face that his father put there to teach him a lesson about respect. And Zuko breaks the chain. He refuses to pass the trauma forward. He absorbs it, he processes it, he sits with it the way Iroh taught him to sit with lightning, channeling it through his stomach rather than his heart, letting it pass through him without letting it destroy him. He takes the violence that was done to him and he does not do it to someone else. He takes the ideology that was given to him and he rejects it. He takes the war that was started by his great-grandfather and he helps end it. He takes the throne that was soaked in blood and he uses it to pour tea, to make peace, to begin the long, slow, unglamorous work of repairing the damage that his family inflicted on the world. This is the hardest lesson in the franchise, not because it is intellectually difficult, because it is emotionally expensive. Breaking a generational cycle costs the comfort of belonging to the group you were born into. It costs the ease of following the path that was laid out for you. It costs the relationships with the people who cannot accept that you have changed. The family members who see your change as betrayal, the friends who see your growth as abandonment, the community that sees your refusal to perpetuate their values as an attack on everything they stand for. Zuko pays all of these costs. He loses his father, he loses his sister, he loses his nation's approval. He gains Iroh, and the group, and the tea shop, and the chance to rebuild. But the gains do not erase the costs. They exist alongside them. They coexist, the way joy and grief coexist, the way the new life and the old wounds coexist, the way the person you are becoming coexists with the person you were, in a dynamic, imperfect, permanently unfinished tension that is not resolution but is, in its own way, enough. The 5th lesson is about balance, and it is the lesson that the entire show is built around, the lesson that the lore of the Avatar universe articulates through every element of its design. Balance is not a destination. It is a practice. It is not something you achieve and then maintain. It is something you do, continuously, actively, in every moment. And the moment you stop doing it, the moment you stop paying attention, the moment you assume that balance, once achieved, will persist on its own, is the moment you begin to lose it. The show teaches this through the Avatar cycle itself. There have been hundreds of avatars across 10,000 years. Each one restored balance. Each one died. And after each death, the balance was lost again, and a new avatar had to be born and trained and tested and had to restore the balance again. The pattern is clear. Balance is never permanent. It is never final. It is never secure. It is always being disrupted by some new threat, some new imbalance, some new expression of the same fundamental forces that have been pulling the world out of alignment since the first human picked up a tool and used it to dominate rather than cooperate. This is not a depressing lesson. It is a realistic one. And the realism is what makes it life-changing, because the alternative to accepting the impermanence of balance is demanding permanence. And the demand for permanence, the insistence that the problem be solved once and for all, is the source of most of the suffering in the Avatar universe. Ozai wants permanent Fire Nation dominance. The Dai Li want permanent control of Ba Sing Se. Long Feng wants permanent silence. Kuvira wants permanent order. Every villain in the franchise is, in some way, pursuing permanence, pursuing a state of affairs that will last forever and never need to be adjusted or renegotiated or reconsidered. And every villain fails, because permanence is a fantasy. Change is the only constant. The dance never stops. And the only sane response to a world that is always changing is to change with it, to adapt, to remain flexible, to accept that the work of maintaining balance is never done, and to do it anyway. Not because you will succeed permanently, but because the doing itself is the point. The four elements themselves teach this lesson through their natures. Fire is dynamic, aggressive, always consuming, always hungry for fuel. Water is adaptive, always finding the path of least resistance, always filling the shape of whatever contains it. Earth is stable, patient, enduring, the element that waits and outlasts. Air is free, detached, everywhere and nowhere, the element you cannot hold and cannot cage. Each element practiced in isolation produces a personality type that is incomplete. A person who is all fire burns out. A person who is all water has no center. A person who is all earth never moves. A person who is all air never lands. The balance the avatar represents is not the suppression of these qualities, but their integration. The avatar is fire and water and earth and air simultaneously, not alternating between them, but holding all four at once, the way a healthy person holds ambition and patience, passion and restraint, stability and freedom, in a dynamic equilibrium that shifts moment to moment without ever collapsing into one extreme. The nations of the avatar world have codified the elements into cultures, and those cultures, when they become rigid, when they mistake a partial truth for a complete one, produce the imbalances that drive the show's conflicts. The Fire Nation's emphasis on fire, on power, on expansion, on the dynamic energy that drives change, produced a culture that consumed everything in its path, including itself. The Earth Kingdom's emphasis on earth, on stability, on endurance, on the patient immovability that resists change, produced a culture that was so resistant to change that it became stagnant, that it hid behind walls and willful ignorance, and the fiction that if you do not acknowledge a problem, it does not exist. The Water Tribe's emphasis on water, on adaptation, on flowing with circumstance, produced cultures that adapted to their environment so completely that they became isolated. The Northern Tribe behind its ice walls, the Southern Tribe diminished to a handful of tents. The Air Nomads' emphasis on air, on freedom, on detachment, produced a culture so detached from worldly affairs that it was unprepared for the violence that destroyed it. Each nation's greatest strength is also its greatest vulnerability. This is the paradox of the four-element system, and it is one of the show's deepest observations about human nature. The thing you are best at is the thing that can destroy you. The quality that defines you is the quality that limits you. And the only escape from this paradox is balance. The willingness to be more than one thing, to hold opposing qualities simultaneously, to be both strong and flexible, both stable and adaptive, both passionate and patient, both free and connected. The real-world application of this lesson is staggering in its scope. Think about the cultures and institutions and individuals you know. Think about the ones that failed. How many of them failed because they doubled down on their greatest strength until it became their fatal flaw? How many companies failed because they were so good at one thing that they refused to learn another? How many relationships failed because one person's defining quality, the intensity that attracted their partner, the independence that impressed their friends, the ambition that built their career, became the thing that pushed everyone away? How many nations failed because they pursued a single value, security, freedom, growth, order, to the exclusion of all others? And the exclusion produced the very catastrophe that the value was supposed to prevent. Balance is not moderation. This is a distinction that the Avatar universe makes clearly and that most people miss. Moderation means doing less of everything. Balance means doing the right amount of everything, and the right amount changes depending on the circumstances. Sometimes balance requires extreme action. Sometimes balance requires fire, the aggressive pursuit of change, the refusal to accept the status quo, the burning away of structures that have outlived their usefulness. Sometimes balance requires water, the patient acceptance of circumstance, the willingness to flow around obstacles rather than through them, the recognition that some problems cannot be solved by force. The Avatar does not moderate between the elements. The Avatar moves between them, using each one as the situation demands, being fire when fire is needed, and water when water is needed, and earth when earth is needed, and knowing, always knowing, which one is needed now, in this moment, in this specific circumstance, because the knowledge of which element to use is itself a kind of bending, the most important kind, the bending of perception, the bending of judgment, the bending of the self toward the response that the world requires. This is what it means to be balanced, not to be calm, not to be centered, not to sit in a meditation pose and achieve inner peace, although those things are sometimes part of it. To be balanced means to have access to your full range, to be able to be fierce when fierceness is needed, and gentle when gentleness is needed, to be able to fight and to be able to surrender, to be able to hold on and to be able to let go, to be complete, to be, in the Avatar universe's language, all four elements at once. even if you can only bend one, because the elements are not just bending arts. They are ways of being. They are approaches to life. They are philosophies that the nations have codified into cultures, but that exist in their pure form inside every person, available to anyone who is willing to learn all four, rather than clinging to one. The sixth lesson is about strength, and it is taught through the character who seems, on the surface, to be the weakest. Aang is 12 years old, he is small, he is silly, he makes jokes at inappropriate times, he rides penguins, he plays with lemurs. He does not look like a hero. He does not act like a hero. He does not carry himself with the gravity and the seriousness that the situation demands. The world is at war. Millions have suffered. The air nomads are dead. The Fire Nation is burning everything. And the boy who is supposed to fix all of this is playing with a flying bison and refusing to eat meat. And Aang saves the world, not despite these qualities, because of them. His playfulness is his resilience. His silliness is his refusal to be hardened by the world's cruelty. His childishness is his connection to the joy and the wonder that the war has tried to destroy, the qualities that the Fire Nation's ideology has tried to extinguish, the lightness that the weight of the world has tried to crush. Aang's strength is not the strength of a warrior. It is the strength of a child who has seen the worst things the world can do and has decided, consciously and deliberately, to remain kind anyway. This is the most radical lesson Avatar teaches. Strength is not hardness. Strength is not the ability to endure without feeling. Strength is not the scar or the stoic face or the suppression of emotion that so many stories present as the markers of a real hero. Strength in the Avatar universe is the ability to feel everything, the grief and the rage and the fear and the love, and still choose gentleness, still choose compassion, still choose to play with the lemur and ride the penguin and make the joke, because these things are not distractions from the serious work of saving the world. They are the serious work. They are the proof that the world is worth saving. They are the evidence that the cruelty has not won, that the war has not destroyed everything, that somewhere underneath the ash and the politics and the 100 years of suffering, there is still a boy who can laugh. And his laughter is the most powerful sound in the universe, more powerful than lightning, more powerful than combustion, more powerful than the comet itself, because the laughter proves that the thing the Fire Nation tried to destroy is indestructible. This redefinition of strength is the most countercultural thing Avatar does, and it does it so gradually, so patiently, that most viewers absorb the lesson without realizing they are being taught. For 3 seasons, the show presents a protagonist who does not conform to any traditional model of heroic masculinity. He does not brood. He does not rage. He does not suppress his emotions behind a wall of stoic toughness. He cries when he is sad. He laughs when he is happy. He dances with strangers. He talks to animals. He plays games in the middle of a war, and the show never, not once, presents these qualities as things he needs to overcome in order to become a real hero. They are what make him a real hero. The gentleness is not the chrysalis that the warrior will eventually burst out of. The gentleness is the final form. The gentleness is the strength. Compare Aang with the characters who embody traditional strength. Ozai is the strongest firebender in the world. He is cruel, domineering, abusive, and he is defeated by a child who refuses to fight on his terms. Zhao is a military commander with the resources of an empire behind him, and he is dragged into the spirit world by a force he cannot comprehend because he was too arrogant to understand that military power is not the only kind of power. Jet is brave and bold and physically impressive, and his inability to temper his aggression with compassion makes him a villain before it makes him a tragedy. In every case, the characters who embody traditional strength, the characters who are tough and aggressive and domineering, fail. They fail because their model of strength is incomplete. They have fire without water. They have earth without air. They have the power to destroy, but not the wisdom to know when destruction is wrong. Aang's model of strength is complete because it is paradoxical. He is the most powerful person in the world, and the most gentle. He can level mountains, and he chooses to pet lemurs. He can destroy armies, and he chooses to make people laugh. The power is real. The choice is what makes it strength. Because strength without choice is not strength. It is compulsion. It is the inability to do anything other than what your power demands. And true strength, the strength that the Avatar embodies, is the ability to have all the power in the world, and to use it with discernment, with compassion, with the constant awareness that the decision to not use power is often more courageous and more difficult than the decision to use it. Katara demonstrates this differently. Katara's strength is her refusal to accept the limitations that the world places on her. She is a girl in a tribe that does not teach girls to fight. She demands to be taught. She is a student who arrives at the North Pole to find that the greatest waterbending school in the world refuses to train women in combat. She challenges the policy. She challenges Master Paku, the most accomplished waterbender alive. And she does not beat him, not in the sense of winning the fight, but she earns his respect. And the respect changes the policy. And the policy change means that every girl who comes after Katara will have access to the training that was denied to the girls who came before her. Katara's strength is structural. It is not just about her individual ability, although her individual ability is remarkable. It is about her refusal to accept that the world is organized correctly. It is about her insistence that the world can be reorganized, that the rules can be rewritten, that the structures that prevent people from reaching their potential are not natural laws, but human constructions, and human constructions can be deconstructed and replaced with better ones. This is the most important kind of strength in the Avatar universe. Not the strength to defeat an enemy, the strength to change a system. Not the strength to win a fight, the strength to make the fight unnecessary for the people who come after you. Sokka's strength is the most overlooked and perhaps the most applicable to the real world. Sokka is not a bender. In a world where bending is the primary source of power, the primary determinant of social status, the primary measure of a person's worth, Sokka has nothing. He cannot move rocks, or shoot fire, or bend water, or ride the wind. He is, by the Avatar universe's most superficial metric, ordinary, and his ordinariness is his superpower. Because Sokka, who cannot rely on bending, must rely on everything else. He must think, he must plan, he must improvise. He must develop skills that benders never need to develop, because benders have a cosmic cheat code, and Sokka has a boomerang. Sokka becomes the strategist, the planner, the idea guy, the person who looks at a problem and sees not the elemental solution, but the structural one, the mechanical one, the solution that does not require bending because the person solving the problem does not have any. And his solutions are often better than the bending solutions, not because bending is inadequate, but because Sokka's approach is different. And different approaches produce different results. And the results of strategic thinking are often more lasting and more widely applicable than the results of raw power. The lesson of Sokka is the lesson of the non-bender, and it applies to everyone who has ever felt ordinary in a world that celebrates the extraordinary. You do not need to be the most powerful person in the room to be the most valuable. You do not need to have the flashiest ability to make the biggest contribution. Sometimes the most important person is the one with the plan. Sometimes the most crucial skill is the ability to think clearly under pressure. Sometimes the boomerang, thrown at the right time from the right angle by someone who has spent their whole life compensating for the absence of power with the presence of intelligence, is more effective than all the bending in the world. The seventh lesson is about forgiveness, and it is taught through the reunion that the entire show builds toward. Zuko goes to Iroh. He stands outside Iroh's tent in the White Lotus camp, and he is afraid. Not afraid of the Fire Lord, not afraid of Azula, not afraid of any external threat. Afraid that the person he loves most in the world will not forgive him for what he has done. Afraid that the betrayal in Ba Sing Se, the choosing of Azula, the rejection of everything Iroh offered, has destroyed the relationship permanently. Afraid that he has used up all of Iroh's patience and all of Iroh's love, and that the tea has gone cold and the cup is empty and there is nothing left. And Iroh embraces him, without hesitation, without the speech about how disappointed he is, or the lecture about what Zuko should have done differently. He just holds him. And the holding says everything. It says that love is not a limited resource. It says that forgiveness is not a transaction. It says that the bond between two people who love each other is not destroyed by betrayal. It is tested by it. And the test, if both people survive it, makes the bond stronger, not weaker, because now they know. Now they know that the bond can survive the worst thing. Now they know that the love is real, not in the easy, comfortable, untested way that love is real when nothing has gone wrong, but in the hard, scarred, proven way that love is real when everything has gone wrong and the love is still there, still warm, still waiting, still pouring tea. The eighth lesson is about vulnerability, and it is taught through the character who builds the strongest walls. Toph Beifong is the greatest earthbender who has ever lived, and she hides behind her power, the way some people hide behind humor, or anger, or silence. She is brash, abrasive, independent to the point of isolation, and she presents herself to the world as someone who does not need anyone, who does not want help, who does not require the support that lesser people depend on. She builds walls. She builds them out of earth and out of attitude, and out of the carefully maintained fiction that being strong means being alone. The show chips away at this fiction gradually, patiently, with the same care that it applies to Zuko's redemption. Toph's vulnerability surfaces in small moments, when she cannot swim and has to be helped across a body of water, when she cannot see on sand because her seismic sense does not work properly on shifting ground, when she admits, quietly, to Katara that she sometimes feels useless because she cannot contribute to tasks that require sight. Each admission costs her something. Each moment of vulnerability feels like a breach in the wall she has built, and you can see her repairing the breach as quickly as possible, rebuilding the facade of invulnerability before anyone notices the crack. But the cracks are the lesson. The cracks are where the light gets in. Toph's journey is the show's argument that vulnerability is not weakness, that asking for help is not failure, that the walls we build to protect ourselves also imprison us, cutting us off from the connections and the support that make the protection unnecessary. Toph is the strongest earthbender in the world, and she is also a 12-year-old girl who ran away from home and misses her parents and is afraid of being seen as less than what she has told everyone she is. The strength and the fear coexist. They are not contradictions. They are the full picture of what it means to be human, or at least what it means to be a person who is powerful enough to never need help and wise enough, eventually, to accept it anyway. The legend of Korra adds a layer to this lesson through Toph's old age. Old Toph, living alone in the foggy swamp, is a woman who has spent a lifetime being strong, and who has in her solitude finally confronted the cost of that strength. Her relationship with her daughters is strained. Her relationships with the people she grew up with have faded. She is alone, not because no one wants to be with her, but because she pushed everyone away, because the walls she built in childhood became the architecture of her adult life, because the independence that saved her at 12 isolated her at 80. Old Toph is not bitter. She is reflective. She has had decades to consider the trade-offs, and the consideration has produced not regret but understanding. She understands that strength without vulnerability is not strength. It is armor, and armor protects you, but it also weighs you down, and eventually the weight becomes heavier than the threats it was designed to defend against. Azula's story is the dark mirror of Toph's lesson about vulnerability. Azula never allows herself to be vulnerable. She never shows weakness. She never asks for help. She is in every scene the most controlled, most certain, most invulnerable person in the room. And the invulnerability destroys her. It destroys her because the human psyche is not designed to be invulnerable. It is designed to connect, to attach, to need other people, to be seen and known and held by people who care about you not because of what you can do, but because of who you are. Azula has none of this. Azula has people who fear her, people who obey her, people who admire her power. She does not have people who love her. She does not have people who have seen her at her worst and stayed anyway. When Azula banishes her friends, when she banishes the Dai Li, when she banishes her servants, when she stands alone in the Fire Lord's palace surrounded by nothing but her own reflection, the show is dramatizing the logical endpoint of invulnerability. If you never let anyone in, eventually no one is left. If you never show weakness, no one can support you when you actually are weak. If you never ask for help, you are alone when you need help most. And the loneliness, the terrible echoing Hall of Mirrors loneliness of a person who has driven everyone away through the sheer force of her unwillingness to be seen, is the thing that breaks her. Not Zuko, not Katara, not the loss of the Agni Kai. The loneliness, the consequence of decades of invulnerability finally catching up with her in a single devastating afternoon. Azula's breakdown in front of the mirror, where she hallucinates her mother, is the most psychologically sophisticated scene in the franchise. She sees Ursa in the mirror, and Ursa says the thing that Azula has been terrified of hearing her entire life. That Ursa loves her, that the love was always there, that the coldness Azula perceived was not rejection but fear, not indifference but helplessness, the helplessness of a mother who could see what her daughter was becoming and could not stop it. And Azula shatters. She attacks the mirror. She destroys the reflection. Because the love, the real, unconditional I love you despite everything love that Ursa offers, is the one thing Azula cannot defend against, the one weapon that her armor has no answer for, the one force that penetrates the invulnerability and reaches the person underneath, the frightened, lonely, desperately unhappy person who built the armor in the first place. Because the alternative, being seen, being known, being loved for who she actually was rather than feared for who she pretended to be, was too terrifying to contemplate. Azula's tragedy is the cautionary tale that accompanies every lesson about vulnerability. Vulnerability is terrifying. It is legitimately dangerous. When you let people see who you really are, some of them will use that knowledge to hurt you. Some of them will reject what they see. Some of them will leave. This is real. This is the risk. And the risk is why people build armor, why they construct invulnerable facades, why they present to the world a version of themselves that is stronger and more certain and more controlled than they actually feel. The armor is rational. It is a response to genuine threats. It works. Until it does not. Until the armor becomes so heavy that you cannot move. Until the facade becomes so rigid that it cracks under its own weight. Until the person inside the armor has been alone for so long that they have forgotten what they look like without it. And when they finally take it off, or when it is finally stripped away, what remains is not a person but a question. Who am I without the armor? Who am I without the control? Who am I when I am just me, vulnerable, imperfect, uncertain, afraid? The lesson is that the armor must come off voluntarily. It must be removed by choice, in conditions of safety, in the presence of people who can be trusted with what is underneath. Toph takes her armor off slowly, in small pieces, in the company of people who have earned her trust by demonstrating, through consistent behavior over time, that they will not hurt her if she shows them the soft parts. Azula never takes her armor off. It is ripped away by crisis, by loneliness, by the progressive elimination of every support and every relationship and every connection that might have provided the safety necessary for voluntary disarmament. And the forced removal, the violent exposure, is the thing that breaks her. Because vulnerability without safety is not growth. It is trauma. And trauma without support is not transformation. It is destruction. The people who help you take the armor off are the most important people in your life. They are the Eras and the Kataras and the Topes, the people who see the armor and do not attack it or ignore it or demand its removal, but simply wait, patiently, consistently, lovingly for you to take it off yourself, knowing that you will take it off when you are ready, and that readiness cannot be forced, only invited, only made possible by the creation of conditions safe enough to risk the terrifying, liberating, life-changing act of being seen. The ninth lesson is about purpose, and it is taught through the Air Nomad genocide, the most devastating event in the show's history, and one of the most thoughtfully handled depictions of genocide in any medium. The Air Nomads were a people defined by their spirituality, their connection to the wind, their philosophy of detachment and freedom. They were monks and nuns, artists and philosophers, people who traveled the world on sky bison and lived in temples at the tops of mountains, and valued the life of every creature, from the smallest insect to the largest whale, with a reverence that the other nations found admirable, if somewhat impractical. The Fire Nation killed them all. Every man, woman, and child, every monk, every nun, every sky bison except Appa. The genocide was total. It was systematic. It was motivated by the desire to prevent the birth of the next Avatar, who would have been an airbender, and it succeeded in eliminating an entire culture, an entire way of being in the world. The Air Nomads are gone. Their temples are empty. Their traditions exist only in the memory of a single 12-year-old boy who was frozen in ice for 100 years and who woke up to discover that everyone he knew, everyone he loved, everything that made him who he was, had been erased from the earth. Aang's response to this loss is the show's most sustained exploration of what it means to carry the weight of being the last of something. He is the last airbender. He is the only living representative of a culture that spanned thousands of years. Every air nomad tradition, every airbending form, every recipe, every song, every prayer, every piece of accumulated wisdom that the monks passed down through generations of teaching, all of it now lives in him, in his memory, in his practice, in his imperfect and incomplete recollection of a world that no one else can remember because no one else survived. The lesson is about purpose derived from loss. Aang's airbending is not just a martial art, it is a cultural practice. Every form he performs is a memorial. Every time he uses his airbending, he is keeping his people alive, not physically, because they are gone and cannot be brought back, but culturally, spiritually, in the only way that matters, which is through the continuation of what they valued and what they created and what they believed. Aang is not just the Avatar. He is a living museum. He is the last library of a burned civilization. And his purpose, the purpose that sustains him through the war and the loss and the weight of a world that needs saving, is not just to defeat the Fire Lord, it is to ensure that the Air Nomads did not die for nothing, that their culture survives in at least one person, that the wind still carries their memory, even if the wind is the only thing left that remembers. By the time of The Legend of Korra, the Air Nation is being rebuilt. Tenzin, Aang's son, has dedicated his life to this project, training new airbenders, rebuilding the temples, resurrecting the traditions that his father carried alone for so long. And in Season 3 of Korra, when harmonic convergence grants airbending to people who were not born with it, the Air Nation is reborn in a way that no one anticipated. New airbenders appear across the world, ordinary people who suddenly find themselves connected to an element that was supposed to be extinct. And Tenzin must decide what the Air Nation means now, whether it is defined by bloodline or by philosophy, by ancestry or by choice, by who your parents were or by what you believe. This question is the lesson. What does it mean to belong to something? Is a culture defined by the people who were born into it, or by the people who choose it? Are the air nomads the monks who died 100 years ago, or are they anyone who embraces the principles of freedom and spirituality and reverence for life that the monks embodied? Is identity something you inherit, or something you create? And the show's answer, delivered through Tenzin's gradual acceptance of the new airbenders and through Korra's decision to support the Air Nation's reconstruction, is that identity is both. It is inherited and it is created. It is given to you and it is chosen by you. And the culture that survives is the culture that is open enough to welcome the people who choose it, not just the people who were born into it. Tenzin's own story is a lesson about the weight of legacy, and it is one of the most underappreciated character arcs in the franchise. Tenzin is Aang's son. He is the son of the Avatar, the son of the last airbender, and he has spent his entire life defined by that identity. He is the carrier of his father's legacy. He is the teacher who must pass on the traditions that his father preserved. He is the bridge between the old Air Nation, which died, and the new Air Nation, which has not yet been born. And the weight of this responsibility has shaped him into a person who is rigid, controlling, serious to the point of humorlessness. A man so focused on doing justice to his father's legacy that he has forgotten to develop his own identity. The Legend of Korra puts Tenzin through a process of discovery that mirrors, in quieter tones, the discoveries that the original series put its characters through. Tenzin must learn that he is not his father. That honoring a legacy does not mean replicating it. That the best way to serve the Air Nation's future is not to recreate the Air Nation's past, but to create something new. Something that incorporates the old traditions, but is not confined by them. Something that is Tenzin's as much as it is Aang's. Something that carries the values forward without carrying the rigidity forward with them. His journey through the Fog of Lost Souls in Season 2 is the crucible in which this lesson is forged. The fog confronts Tenzin with his deepest fear, which is not a fear of failure, but a fear of being himself. He has spent so long being Aang's son that he does not know who Tenzin is. He does not know what Tenzin values apart from what Aang valued. He does not know what Tenzin wants apart from what Aang wanted him to want. The fog strips away the pretense and leaves him standing in front of the question that he has avoided for 50 years. Who are you when you are not your father's son? Who are you when the legacy is set aside and the obligation is lifted and the identity you have been performing for your entire life is no longer required? And what remains is just you, Tenzin, a middle-aged man with a family and a set of beliefs that might or might not be his own. The answer Tenzin finds in the fog is simple and devastating. I am not a reflection of my father. I am Tenzin. And the declaration, the statement of separate identity, the refusal to be defined entirely by someone else's story, is presented as both a liberation and a grief, because being yourself means not being someone else, and the someone else you are not being is the person you love most. And the distance between you and them, the distance that separate identity requires, is the loneliest feeling in the world, even when the world is full of people who love you for who you actually are. This lesson about legacy and identity is one that the show rarely gets credit for, and it is one of the most universally applicable. How many people live as reflections of their parents? How many people define themselves by the expectations of their families, their cultures, their communities, the people who shaped them before they were old enough to participate in the shaping? How many people reach middle age and realize that they do not know who they are apart from the roles they were given, the identities they inherited, the stories they were told about who they should become? Tenzin's journey through the fog is the journey of every person who has ever woken up at 3 a.m. and wondered whether the life they are living is their life or someone else's. The lesson is not that you should reject your legacy, the lesson is that you should choose it. That inheritance is not the same as choice, that the values you were taught are not fully yours until you examine them, test them, challenge them, and decide consciously and deliberately that they are worth keeping. Tenzin keeps the values, he keeps the airbending, he keeps the respect for life and the commitment to spirituality and the dedication to rebuilding what was destroyed. But he keeps them as Tenzin, not as Aang's shadow. He keeps them because he has examined them and found them worthy, not because they were handed to him and he was too afraid to put them down. There is an 11th lesson that the show teaches through its structure rather than through any individual character arc, and it is the lesson about connection. The show is, at its most fundamental level, a story about people who find each other. Aang, Katara, and Sokka meet by accident. Toph joins the group because of a vision and a tournament. Zuko joins the group because of a journey that takes 3 seasons, and that no one, including Zuko, anticipated at the beginning. The group is not assembled by destiny, or at least not by a destiny that anyone can articulate. It is assembled by the accumulation of choices, chance encounters, shared experiences, and the slow development of trust between people who started as strangers and became a family. The family that the group becomes is the show's most radical statement about the nature of connection. These are not biological relatives. They are not bound by blood or by cultural obligation or by any of the structures that traditionally define family. They are bound by choice. They chose each other. They chose to travel together, to fight together, to sleep on the ground together, to eat terrible food together, to argue with each other and forgive each other and annoy each other and save each other over and over until the choosing became the bond, until the accumulation of shared experience became stronger than any blood tie, until the family they built was more real to them than the families they were born into. This is a lesson that many people need and that few stories teach honestly. The family you are born into is not the only family available to you. The connections that matter most are not always the connections that biology provides. Sometimes the people who understand you best are the people you found along the way, the people who showed up at the right time and stayed, the people who chose you when they could have chosen otherwise, the people whose presence in your life is not an obligation but a decision, renewed daily, to keep walking the same path. Aang's group is this kind of family. And the strength of the group, the reason they succeed where armies fail, where lone heroes fail, where the past avatars who acted alone ultimately failed, is that they are together. They are connected. Each person contributes something that the others lack. Aang's gentleness, Katara's compassion, Sokka's intelligence, Toph's strength, Zuko's redemption. Each quality is essential. Each person is necessary. And the whole, the group, the team, the family, is greater than the sum of its parts. Not in the cliche sense, but in the literal sense. Because the things they can do together, the things they can survive together, the things they can become together, are things that none of them could do or survive or become alone. The concept of chosen family is radical in any context, but it is especially radical in the context of the Avatar universe, which is organized around the family structures of its 4 nations. The Water Tribes are organized by clan. The Earth Kingdom is organized by lineage. The Fire Nation is organized by dynasty. The Air Nomads were organized by monastic community, which is the closest any of the 4 nations came to the concept of chosen family, and the Air Nomads were destroyed. The Avatar universe's political structures assume that family is biological, that loyalty is inherited, that identity is determined by the nation and the family you are born into. And Team Avatar blows this assumption apart. Zuko's most important family relationship is not with his father or his sister, or even his mother. It is with Iroh, his uncle, a man who chose to love him when his biological parents failed. Toph's most important relationships are not with the parents who raised her in a gilded cage. They are with the friends who met her in an earthbending tournament and who treated her blindness not as a disability to be accommodated, but as a difference to be respected. Aang's most important connections after the genocide are not with the air nomad traditions he preserves, although those matter. They are with the people who travel with him, who fight beside him, who form the new community that replaces the community that was destroyed. The show is saying something important here, something that many people need to hear. The family you were born into is not the only family you will ever have. If the family you were given does not see you, does not support you, does not create the conditions in which you can grow, you can find another family. You can build one. You can assemble it from the people who show up, from the strangers who become allies, who become friends, who become the people you would die for, and who would die for you, not because they have to, not because biology demands it, but because they choose to. Freely, daily, without obligation, without contract, without anything except the mutual recognition that this group, this collection of imperfect people who somehow fit together, is home. Home is not a place. Home is the people who know you and choose to stay. Home is the bison you ride and the tea you drink and the fire you sit around at night trading stories about the things you have survived. Home is the argument you have with someone you love and the making up that follows. And a silent understanding that the argument did not break anything, that the bond is stronger than the disagreement, that the family you built can withstand the storms that families must withstand, because that is what families do. They endure, they adapt, they forgive, they hold on, they pour the tea, they welcome you back. They tell you through their presence, through the simple, stubborn, irrational fact of still being here, that you are worth staying for. The 10th lesson is about letting go, and it is taught through the guru who tries to teach Aang about the chakras and fails. Guru Pathak, the ancient man who sits on the steps of the Eastern Air Temple eating onion and banana juice, teaches Aang that the avatar state can only be fully mastered by opening all 7 chakras, and that each chakra is blocked by a different negative emotion that must be released. fear, guilt, shame, grief, lies, illusion. And finally, earthly attachment. Aang opens 6 chakras. He releases his fear, his guilt, his shame, his grief. He confronts the lies he tells himself and the illusions he clings to. He does the work. He sits with each negative emotion and he processes it. Not by denying it, but by acknowledging it, by looking at it directly, by accepting that it is part of him and then choosing to release it, to let it flow through him rather than accumulate inside him, to treat his emotional landscape the way a waterbender treats a river, not by damming it, but by letting it flow. But he cannot open the 7th chakra. The 7th chakra, the crown chakra, is blocked by earthly attachment, and the attachment Aang cannot release is his love for Katara. Guru Pathak tells him he must let go of this attachment to fully master the avatar state, and Aang refuses. He chooses Katara. He chooses the attachment, he chooses the human connection over the cosmic power, and he walks away from the Eastern Air Temple with 6 open chakras and 1 closed one, more powerful than he was but not as powerful as he could be, more spiritually developed but not fully developed. A work in progress rather than a finished product. The lesson here is the most complex the show offers, because the show itself seems conflicted about it. On one hand, Aang's attachment to Katara is presented as a good thing, a human thing, a beautiful thing. On the other hand, the attachment prevents him from fully mastering the avatar state, which is a real limitation with real consequences. When Azula shoots him with lightning in the Season 2 finale, Aang is in the process of opening the 7th chakra, and the lightning interrupts the process, killing him temporarily and nearly permanently. The lesson is that attachment has a price. Connection has a cost. Love makes you vulnerable in ways that detachment does not. And the show does not tell you which is better, the cosmic power of detachment or the human warmth of connection. It presents both options honestly, and it lets you decide. Guru Lagima, the airbender who achieved flight by releasing all earthly attachments, is presented as a figure of awe and also of horror, a person who achieved the highest spiritual state by paying the highest personal price. And Aang, who refuses to pay that price, who clings to his attachment, who chooses love over power, is presented as both limited and fully human, as both flawed and exactly right. This tension between attachment and detachment, between connection and freedom, between the human desire to love and the spiritual aspiration to transcend, is the tension at the heart of the Avatar universe. The show does not resolve it because it cannot be resolved. It can only be lived. Lived the way Aang lives it, with 6 open chakras and 1 closed one, with most of his fears released, and 1 attachment held tight, with the cosmic energy flowing through him but not completely, not perfectly, not the way a guru would want, but the way a person needs, because a person is not a guru and a guru is not a person, and the space between the two is where life happens, messy and incomplete and beautiful. There is a 12th lesson that the Avatar universe teaches, and it is embedded so deeply in the mythology that you might not recognize it as a lesson at all. It is the lesson about power and responsibility, and it is taught not through a single character, but through the institution of the Avatar itself. The Avatar is the most powerful being in the world. The Avatar can bend all 4 elements. The Avatar can enter the Avatar state and access the combined power of every Avatar who has ever lived. The Avatar can communicate with spirits, cross between worlds, and bend the very energy that makes bending possible. The Avatar is, by any reasonable measure, a god, or at least as close to a god as the Avatar universe allows. And the Avatar is also a servant. The Avatar's power exists not for the Avatar's benefit, but for the world's. The Avatar does not rule. The Avatar does not command. The Avatar does not sit on a throne and issue decrees. The Avatar mediates. The Avatar balances. The Avatar spends their life traveling from crisis to crisis, solving problems they did not create, fixing things they did not break, cleaning up messes that other people made, and receiving, in return, not wealth or power or adulation, but the knowledge that the world is slightly more balanced than it was before they arrived. This is a radical reimagining of what power is for. In most stories, power is a means to an end, the end being the hero's personal fulfillment, the hero's romantic success, the hero's ascension to a position of authority. In the Avatar universe, power is a responsibility. It is a weight, not a wing. It is a burden carried on behalf of others, not a tool wielded for personal gain. The Avatar is the most powerful person in the world, and also, in many ways, the least free. The Avatar cannot choose where to live. The Avatar cannot choose what to do with their time. The Avatar cannot opt out, cannot retire, cannot say I have done enough and I am going to sit on a beach for the rest of my life. The Avatar's power is inseparable from the Avatar's obligation. And the obligation lasts until death and then continues in the next life and the next and the next. Forever. An unbroken chain of service stretching back 10,000 years and forward into infinity. Korra's story is the most sustained exploration of what this burden feels like from the inside. Korra begins the series eager for the role. She is excited to be the Avatar. She is thrilled by the power, the prestige, the importance. She wants to fight and she wants to lead and she wants to be the center of the story. And over 4 seasons, the show systematically strips away every layer of this eagerness, confronting Korra with enemies who challenge not just her power, but her right to have it, her worthiness to wield it, her very identity as the Avatar. Amon takes her bending. Unalaq severs her connection to her past lives. Zahir poisons her and nearly kills her. Kuvira demonstrates that the world can function, for better or worse, without the Avatar entirely. By the end of the series, Korra is a fundamentally different person from the girl who burst through a wall in the first episode to declare with glee that she was the Avatar. She is quieter, more compassionate, more humble. She has been broken and rebuilt multiple times, and the rebuilding has produced a person who understands power not as an entitlement but as a trust, not as a source of identity, but as a tool that must be wielded with care. Not as the thing that makes her special, but as the thing that makes her responsible. Korra's PTSD arc in Season 4 is the bravest narrative choice in the entire franchise, and it is the one that elevates the show from excellent children's television to something genuinely important. After being poisoned by Zahir, Korra spends years recovering, not just physically, but psychologically. She has flashbacks. She is unable to enter the Avatar state. She is haunted by a vision of herself in the Avatar state, a phantom that appears in moments of crisis and paralyzes her with fear. She is, in clinical terms, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and the show does not minimize it, does not hand-wave it, does not resolve it with a training montage or a magical cure. It shows the slow, difficult, unglamorous process of recovery. It shows the setbacks. It shows the frustration. It shows what it looks like when the most powerful person in the world cannot get out of bed. The lesson is that trauma is real, and recovery is work, and there is no shortcut and no cheat code, and no technique, no matter how forbidden or how ancient, that can bypass the process of healing. You have to sit with it. You have to feel it. You have to let the pain move through you the way a waterbender lets water move through them. Not by damming it, not by diverting it, not by pretending it is not there, but by accepting it, by acknowledging that the pain is real and the wound is real and the recovery will take as long as it takes, and the only way through is through. Toph helps Korra remove the residual metal poison from her body, but the removal of the physical poison is not the end of the recovery. The metal was the symptom. The trauma was the disease, and the trauma does not respond to metal bending. It responds to time, to patience, to the slow rebuilding of trust in yourself and in the world, to the gradual realization that being broken does not mean being finished, that the cracks are not signs of failure but signs of healing, that the person you are after the breaking is not lesser than the person you were before but different, deeper, more compassionate, more real. Korra's final conversation with Tenzin, in which she tells him that she would not change her experiences even if she could, even the pain, even the trauma, even the years of recovery, because they made her who she is the show's most mature statement about suffering. It is not a glorification of pain. It is not the claim that suffering is good or necessary or desirable. It is the quieter, harder, more honest claim that suffering, when it happens, when it is unavoidable, when it has already occurred and cannot be undone, can be integrated. It can be made part of the story. It can be transformed from a wound into a wisdom, from a scar into a teaching, from the worst thing that ever happened to you into the thing that made you capable of understanding other people's worst things, the thing that gave you compassion you did not have before, the thing that taught you what strength actually means, which is not the ability to avoid pain but the ability to survive it and still be open, still be kind, still be willing to show up for the next person who needs you. These are the lessons: identity, grief, failure, compassion, balance, strength, forgiveness, vulnerability, purpose, letting go, power, healing, connection. They are not separate. They are not a list to be checked off or a curriculum to be completed. They are layers of a single insight that the Avatar universe articulates through every element of its design. The insight is that being human is hard, that living in a world of beauty and cruelty, of love and loss, of power and vulnerability, is the most challenging thing any of us will ever do, and that the tools we need to do it, the tools that the Avatar universe gives to its characters and through its storytelling gives to us, are not bending arts or cosmic powers or ancient spirits. They are patience and compassion and the willingness to keep trying, to keep showing up, to keep pouring tea even when the world is burning, to keep loving even when love is dangerous, to keep being gentle even when gentleness is misread as weakness, to keep being yourself even when the world would prefer you to be someone else. There is one final lesson, and it is the simplest and the hardest. It is the lesson that Iroh teaches through everything he does, through every cup of tea he pours, through every game of Peisho he plays, through every gentle word and every patient silence and every moment of warmth in a world that is frequently cold. The lesson is that kindness is a choice, and the choice is available to you right now in this moment, regardless of your circumstances, regardless of your power, regardless of your past, regardless of what has been done to you or what you have done to others. You do not need to be the avatar to be kind. You do not need to bend an element to make a difference. You do not need to save the world to save someone's day. Iroh's kindness is not grand. It is not epic. It is not the stuff of legends and prophecies and cosmic battles. It is tea. It is conversation. It is the decision made fresh every morning to treat the people you encounter with warmth and respect and genuine interest, not because they deserve it, although they usually do, but because the act of treating people with kindness is itself the point. The kindness is not the means to an end. It is the end. It is the thing. It is the answer to the question that the entire Avatar universe is asking. Iroh does not pour tea to achieve a strategic objective. He pours tea because the person in front of him could use a cup. He does not play Peisho to gain intelligence or build alliances. He plays Peisho because the game is beautiful and the company is pleasant, and the afternoon is long and there are worse ways to spend it than sitting across from another person and moving pieces on a board and talking about nothing in particular. His kindness is not instrumental. It is not a tool. It is a way of being, a mode of existence, a daily practice that requires nothing except the decision to practice it. And this is maybe the most life-changing thing about the Avatar universe. Not the bending, not the spirits, not the cosmic battles or the ancient civilizations or the 10,000-year mythology. The most life-changing thing is the image of an old man sitting in a garden, pouring tea and being kind. Because the image says something that all the lore and all the mythology and all the philosophy cannot say as clearly. It says that the most important thing you can do with your life is not the most impressive thing. It is not the most powerful thing. It is not the thing that earns you a place in history or a statue in the capital or a legacy that persists for 10,000 years. The most important thing you can do with your life is the most ordinary thing, the most available thing, the thing that requires no special ability and no cosmic power and no ancient wisdom. The most important thing you can do is be kind to the person in front of you. Pour the tea, play the game, listen, be present, be warm, be the cup of tea on the table when someone comes through the door. The Avatar universe teaches many lessons, but this is the one that matters most, not because it is the deepest or the most complex or the most philosophically sophisticated, because it is the most doable, because you can start right now, because you do not need to master the 4 elements, or open your chakras, or defeat the Fire Lord, or save the world. You just need to be kind. You just need to show up. You just need to pour the tea. The Avatar universe is full of lore. It is full of mythology and spirits and bending arts and ancient civilizations and cosmic battles between light and dark. But underneath all of it, underneath the spectacle and the world building and the 4-element system and the 10,000-year history, the lore is about people, about how people fail and how they get up, about how people grieve and how they carry it, about how people are broken and how they heal, about how people are born into stories they did not write and how they find the courage to write their own. About how the most powerful force in the universe is not fire or water or earth or air. It is the choice to be kind when cruelty is easier, to be patient when urgency demands action, to forgive when justice demands punishment, to love when loss demands numbness, to remain soft in a world that rewards hardness. These are the lessons. They are woven into the lore so deeply that you cannot separate them from the mythology without destroying both. The lessons are the lore. The lore is the lessons, and the reason they are life-changing is not that they tell you something you have never heard before. It is that they show you something you have always known but have never seen so clearly, so beautifully, so undeniably. In a story about a bald kid with an arrow on his head who rides a flying bison and saves the world by refusing to kill the man who deserves it most. If this meant something to you tonight, subscribing helps us keep these conversations alive. Thank you for being here. Sleep well. The tea is always waiting.